A box forgotten at the airport for several days revealed a shocking secret when a curious employee decided to peek inside. Before watching this exciting story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for 10 years of good luck. The John F. Kennedy International Airport was bustling with the usual Friday afternoon commotion. Hasty passengers rushed to their boarding gates. Families bid emotional farewells with tight hugs, and employees went about their frantic routines. Amidst all this movement, an ordinary cardboard box, unmarked, lay forgotten in a corner of the lost luggage depot. It had been exactly a week since that mysterious box had arrived there, with no one claiming it. Standard procedure dictated that unclaimed objects should be inspected after 7 days, and it was up to John Smith, a young airport employee, to carry out this task that afternoon. John was a 25-year-old, tall and slender, with curious brown eyes that always seemed to seek something beyond the obvious. He had been working at the airport for only 6 months, but had already stood out for his dedication and attention to detail. That afternoon, he approached the box with a mix of boredom and curiosity. "Another forgotten suitcase full of old clothes, I bet," he murmured to himself as he crouched to examine the object. However, something about that box immediately intrigued him. There were no labels or shipping marks. It was as if it had simply materialized there in the depot. Frowning, John leaned closer, noticing a small crack on the side of the box. That's when he heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound coming from inside. It wasn't the clinking of loose objects or the rustling of clothes. It was something alive. With his heart racing, John brought his eye closer to the crack. What he saw made him recoil in astonishment. Inside the box, 3 pairs of bright eyes stared back at him. "My God!" he exclaimed, standing up abruptly. They're birds!" Without wasting time, John called his supervisor, Susan Thompson, a middle-aged woman with years of experience at the airport. When she arrived, panting and worried, John had already carefully opened the box. What they saw left them both perplexed. 3 night parrots, an extremely rare species, were huddled at the bottom of the box. The birds, usually known for their exuberant plumage, were in a lamentable state. Dirty, malnourished, and visibly frightened, they could barely move. "This is unbelievable," Susan whispered, her voice trembling with emotion and indignation. "Who could do something like this?" John, feeling a mix of compassion and anger, replied, "I don't know, but we have to help them. They need urgent care." Susan nodded, already grabbing the phone. "I'll call the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and an animal rehabilitation center. These poor creatures need specialized care immediately." While Susan made the calls, John stayed by the box, watching the birds with a lump in his throat. How could someone be so cruel as to abandon such magnificent and defenseless creatures? Within hours, the airport turned into a whirlwind of activity. Wildlife agents arrived, accompanied by veterinarians specialized in wild birds. The parrots were carefully removed from the box and placed in proper carriers. Dr. Emily Johnson, a renowned veterinarian specialized in exotic birds, examined the parrots on site. Her diagnosis was grim, but not without hope. "They are severely dehydrated and malnourished," she explained to John and Susan, who were closely following everything. "There are signs of stress and possibly some secondary infections, but with the right care, I believe they can recover." As the birds were prepared for transport to the rehabilitation center, John couldn't take his eyes off them. Something about those night parrots in their scared but resilient eyes deeply touched his heart. Can I go with them?" he hesitantly asked Dr. Emily. "I'd like to know if they'll be okay." The veterinarian smiled, moved by the young man's concern. "Of course, John. In fact, your help would be very welcome. The more hands to care for them, the better." Susan, noticing John's involvement, intervened. "Go with them. I'll take care of things here. Keep me informed about the parrot's condition." Thus, as night fell, John found himself embarking on an unexpected journey. In the back seat of a specially equipped van, he watched the 3 night parrots, now sedated for transport. His shift at the airport had long ended, but that seemed irrelevant in the face of the mission now unfolding before him. As the van pulled away from the airport towards the rehabilitation center, John couldn't imagine how that discovery would change his life. The mysterious box contained not only 3 rare birds, but also the beginning of an adventure that would go far beyond rescuing those parrots. The young airport employee, unknowingly, was about to become involved in a plot involving secrets, passions, and a fight to preserve a species on the brink of extinction. And it all started with a simple box forgotten in a luggage depot. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was an oasis of tranquility on the bustling outskirts of New York City. When the van arrived, it was already past midnight, but the complex's lights shone like a beacon of hope in the darkness. John, exhausted but determined, helped the team unload the night parrots. The smell of antiseptic and animal feed filled the air as they walked through the corridors towards the intensive care unit. Dr. Emily led the team with a calm efficiency that impressed John. "We need to act fast," she instructed. "These parrots are in critical condition." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Although John was not a trained professional, he did his best to help, holding equipment, fetching supplies, and offering words of encouragement to the frightened birds. It was almost dawn when Dr. Emily finally removed her gloves and sighed deeply. "We've done everything we could for now. Now it's a matter of waiting and hoping." John, feeling the weight of exhaustion but reluctant to leave, asked, "Will they be okay?" The veterinarian smiled tiredly. "It's too early to say for sure, but they're fighters. They took a big step today." At that moment, a young woman hurried into the room. Her brown hair was tied in a messy bun, and her green eyes shone with a mix of concern and determination. "Sorry for the delay," she panted. "I came as soon as I got the message. How are they?" Dr. Emily made the introductions. "John, this is Lisa Green, our resident ornithologist and specialist in endangered species. Lisa, this is John Smith, the airport employee who found the parrots." Lisa extended her hand, her grip firm and warm. "Nice to meet you, John. I can't thank you enough for what you did. These night parrots are incredibly rare. Every individual is crucial for the species' survival." As Lisa examined the birds, John couldn't help but notice the passion in her eyes. It was evident that she didn't just see birds there, but a mission, a cause she fought for. "You seem really dedicated to this," commented John. Lisa smiled, a determined gleam in her eyes. "It's more than a profession for me, John. It's a calling. Every species we lose is an irreplaceable part of our world that disappears forever." Her words touched something deep in John. For the first time, he began to see beyond the immediate rescue. There was something bigger at stake here, a race against time to preserve something precious and irreplaceable. Dr. Emily, noticing John's genuine interest, suggested, "Why don't you come back tomorrow? We could use all the help we can get in the coming days." John hesitated for a moment, thinking about his job at the airport. But something inside him had already made the decision. "Sure, I'd love to help. I'll see what I can do about my shifts." On the way back home, John barely noticed the city waking up around him. His mind was filled with images of the parrots, Dr. Emily's dedication, and Lisa's passion. He knew his life had irrevocably changed that night. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activities. John managed to get temporary leave from the airport, thanks to Susan's understanding, who recognized the importance of the situation. He spent most of his time at the rehabilitation center, learning about the night parrots and helping with their treatment. Lisa became his informal mentor, sharing her vast knowledge about the species. "These parrots are native to the Atlantic forest," she explained while caring for the birds. "There are fewer than 250 individuals left in the wild. Each one of these three is invaluable." John absorbed every word, fascinated not only by the birds, but also by Lisa's contagious passion. He began to see the world through new eyes, perceiving the delicate web of life that connected all creatures. Meanwhile, at the airport, Susan conducted her own investigation. The mysterious box had triggered a series of questions she was determined to answer. Who had left the parrots there? How had they gone unnoticed for so long? Reviewing the security footage, Susan noticed something strange. A middle-aged man wearing an employee uniform had left the box in the depot late at night a week earlier. The problem was that she didn't recognize the man. Intrigued, Susan decided to delve deeper into her investigation. She began scouring the employee records, looking for any irregularities. Her search led her to discover subtle discrepancies in recent hiring records. Meanwhile, at the rehabilitation center, the night parrots were starting to show signs of improvement. Their feathers, once dull and matted, were beginning to regain their shine. Their eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, now gleamed with new vitality. "It's incredible," murmured John, watching one of the parrots accept food from his hand for the first time. A week ago, they could barely move. Now look at them. Lisa smiled, placing a hand on John's shoulder. That's why we do what we do. Every life saved is a victory. In that moment, something changed between them. What had begun as a professional partnership was blossoming into something deeper. John felt his heart race with Lisa's touch, and when their eyes met, there was a new intimacy there. However, before they could explore this moment, they were interrupted by the abrupt arrival of Dr. Emily. Her face was pale, and she held a piece of paper in her trembling hands. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tense. "I just received the DNA test results for the parrots. They're not just rare, they're unique. They are the last known representatives of a subspecies thought to be extinct for decades." The ensuing silence was heavy, laden with implications. Lisa was the first to break it, her voice barely containing her emotion. "This changes everything. We're not just saving 3 birds, we're saving an entire species." John, feeling the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders, asked, "What do we do now?" Dr. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze determined. "Now, we contact the authorities. This goes beyond a simple rescue. We need to find out where these parrots came from, and if there are more out there." As the trio discussed the next steps, they couldn't imagine that their actions were about to trigger a series of events that would shake the world of environmental conservation and place them at the center of a plot much larger than they could have ever imagined. The discovery in the forgotten airport box was not just the beginning of a rescue journey. It was the start of an adventure that would test their limits, challenge their convictions, and perhaps change the fate of an entire species. The sun had barely risen when John arrived at the rehabilitation center the next morning. The events of the previous day still echoed in his mind, mingling with restless dreams about parrots and lost forests. As he entered the building, he found Lisa already hunched over a pile of documents, her disheveled hair betraying a sleepless night. "Good morning," he murmured, placing a cup of coffee beside her. "Did you spend the night here?" Lisa looked up, a tired smile on her lips. "Thank you," she said, taking the coffee. "Yes, I couldn't go home. There's so much to process, so many unanswered questions." John pulled up a chair, sitting next to her. "Any progress?" "Some," Lisa replied, running a hand through her hair. "I've been reviewing all the historical records I could find about this subspecies of night parrots. The last confirmed sighting was over 50 years ago, in a remote area of the Atlantic forest that is now almost completely deforested." As they talked, Dr. Emily entered the room, carrying a thick folder. "Good morning, you two. I have news from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're taking the case very seriously. A specialized team is being assembled to investigate the origin of these parrots." The news brought a mixture of relief and apprehension. On one hand, it was reassuring to know that the authorities were involved. On the other, the seriousness of the situation was becoming increasingly evident. "And what about the parrots?" asked John, anxious. "How are they this morning?" Dr. Emily smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Improving every day. The oldest male is already eating on his own, and the other 2 are not far behind. They're fighters, these little ones." As they discussed the next steps of the treatment, John's phone rang. It was Susan from the airport. "John," Susan's voice sounded tense, "I need you to come to the airport immediately. I discovered something you need to see." Intrigued and a bit worried, John excused himself to Lisa and Dr. Emily and headed to the airport. The whole way, his mind buzzed with possibilities. What could Susan have discovered? At the airport, Susan was waiting for him in her office, the blinds drawn and an air of conspiracy in the room. As soon as John entered, she locked the door. "What's going on, Susan?" asked John, feeling the tension in the air. Susan turned on her computer and swiveled the screen so John could see. "Remember the man who left the box with the parrots? Well, I found him." On the screen, John saw the frozen image of a middle-aged man wearing an airport employee uniform. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but John couldn't place it. "Who is he?" he asked. Susan took a deep breath before answering. "His name is Robert Green. He worked here years ago but was fired for irregularities. And there's one more thing, John. He's Lisa Green's father." The revelation hit John like a punch to the gut. Lisa, the passionate defender of animals, had a direct connection to the man who abandoned the parrots. "This doesn't make sense," John murmured, trying to process the information. Lisa has dedicated her life to protecting these birds. How could her father be involved in something like this? Susan shook her head, equally perplexed. I don't know, John, but there's more. In the past few months, there have been a series of strange incidents at the airport. Small thefts, damaged equipment, files accessed without authorization. Everything seemed random until now, but what if? She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication hung heavily in the air. Could these incidents somehow be connected to the parrots? John felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had crucial information, but sharing it would mean casting suspicion on Lisa, someone he was beginning to trust deeply. What do we do now? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Susan looked at him seriously. For now, nothing. We need more information before we act. But John, you need to be careful. If Lisa is involved somehow... John nodded, feeling a knot form in his stomach. As he left Susan's office, his mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. How could he continue working alongside Lisa, knowing what he knew now? Back at the rehabilitation center, John found Lisa feeding the parrots. Watching her interact with the birds, her gentleness and dedication evident in every gesture, he found it even harder to believe she could be involved in something sinister. Is everything okay, John? Asked Lisa, noticing his troubled expression. You look like you've seen a ghost. John forced a smile. Just tired, he lied. It's been an intense week. Lisa nodded, turning her attention back to the parrots. They're progressing so well, she said, her face lighting up. You know, sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't found them in that box. It's like fate intervened. Lisa's words, so full of passion and sincerity, made John question everything Susan had told him. How could this woman, so dedicated to preserving life, be connected to something so dark? As the days passed, John found himself torn between his growing affection for Lisa and the suspicions planted by Susan. Every interaction with Lisa was now filtered through a lens of doubt, every word and gesture analyzed for any sign of duplicity. At the same time, the parrots continued to thrive under the team's care. The oldest male, whom they had nicknamed Tico, was already strong enough to be moved to a larger aviary. The other two, Teko and Tiana, were not far behind in their recovery. It was during a particularly busy afternoon, with John helping to prepare the new aviary, that Lisa surprised him with an unexpected question. John, she began hesitantly, have you ever heard of a place called Green Haven? The name meant nothing to John, but the way Lisa said it with a mix of hope and apprehension intrigued him. No, I've never heard of it. Why? Lisa bit her lip, as if debating internally whether to continue. Finally, she spoke. It's a place my father used to mention, an area of preserved forest, far from the eyes of the world. He said it was the last refuge of species the rest of the world believed extinct. John's heart raced. Could this be the connection they were looking for? The mention of Lisa's father brought back all the suspicions he had tried to suppress. And you believe it could be real? He asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Lisa shrugged, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I don't know. I always thought it was just a story, a conservationist's dream. But now with these parrots, John, what if it's real? What if there are more of them out there? The possibility hung between them, laden with promises and dangers. John knew he should share this information with Susan and the authorities, but something made him hesitate. If Green Haven was real, revealing its existence could put not only the parrots but an entire hidden ecosystem at risk. In that moment, looking at Lisa and the parrots they had rescued together, John made a decision. He would find out the truth about Green Haven, about Lisa's father, and about the mysterious events at the airport. But he would do it his way, protecting Lisa and the parrots at all costs. What John didn't know was that his decision was about to launch him on a journey that would test not only his courage and loyalty, but also his own understanding of what it means to protect nature in an increasingly hostile world. As the sun set over the rehabilitation center, casting long shadows over the aviaries, John and Lisa remained side by side, watching the parrots. The mystery of Green Haven hung between them, a shared secret that could either unite them or tear them apart forever. Morning arrived with a dense fog hanging over the rehabilitation center, as if nature itself was conspiring to keep its secrets hidden. John arrived early, his mind still buzzing with the revelations of the previous day. Lisa's mention of Green Haven had sparked an almost obsessive curiosity in him. As he walked through the silent corridors, John found himself standing before the aviary of the night parrots. Tico, Teco, and Tiana watched him with their bright eyes, as if sensing the turmoil in his heart. "What would you say if you could talk?" John murmured, pressing his hand against the glass. "Where did you really come from? Talking to yourself?" A soft voice surprised him. Lisa stood in the doorway, a tired smile on her face. John turned around, trying to hide his surprise. "Good morning. I couldn't sleep much last night." Lisa approached, her eyes fixed on the parrots. "Me neither. I kept thinking about Green Haven, about my father." The mention of Lisa's father made John tense. He knew he needed to be careful, but he also felt that this was the moment to seek answers. "Lisa," he began hesitantly, "can you tell me more about your father, about his work?" A flash of pain crossed Lisa's face. She remained silent for a moment, as if pondering how much to reveal. "My father, Robert, was complicated," she began finally. "A brilliant man, passionate about nature. He worked at the airport, but his true passion was conservation. He spent all his free time exploring remote areas of the Atlantic forest, documenting rare species." John listened attentively, his heart racing. "And Green Haven?" Lisa sighed deeply. Green Haven was his obsession. He talked about this place as if it were paradise on Earth, a refuge for species the world had forgotten. But then she stopped, her voice choked with emotion. John instinctively placed a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. "What happened?" he asked gently. "He disappeared," Lisa replied, tears shining in her eyes. 5 years ago. He went on one of his expeditions and never returned. The police searched, but nothing. It's like the forest swallowed him." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. John struggled internally, torn between the desire to comfort Lisa and the need to uncover the truth. "Lisa," he said finally, what if your father didn't disappear? What if he was trying to protect something? Something like these parrots?" Lisa's eyes widened, a mix of shock and hope on her face. "What are you saying, John? Do you know something?" At that moment, Dr. Emily entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is here. They want to take the parrots." The news fell like a bomb. John and Lisa exchanged panicked looks. "We can't let them take the birds," said Lisa firmly. "They're not fully recovered yet." John nodded, determined. "Let's talk to them. Maybe we can convince them to wait." The three of them headed to the reception area, where they found 2 wildlife agents. The older one, a man with a serious expression named Thomas Clark, took the lead. "Doctor, Emily, we're here to transfer the night parrots to a federal research center. It's a matter of national security." Lisa stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please, these birds are still recovering. Moving them now could be dangerous for their health." Agent Clark looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Miss Green, I presume?" "Robert Green's daughter." The air seemed to freeze in the room. John felt Lisa stiffen beside him. "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "Did you know my father?" Agent Clark exchanged a significant look with his partner before responding. "Your father was a person of interest to our agency. Miss Green, we need to talk in private." While Lisa was led to an adjacent room, John felt his world collapsing. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was more complex and disturbing than he could have imagined. Dr. Emily, sensing John's anguish, pulled him aside. "There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" she whispered. John hesitated for a moment before making a decision. In a low voice, he shared with Dr. Emily everything he knew. Susan's discoveries at the airport, the connection to Lisa's father, the mysterious Green Haven. Dr. Emily's eyes widened as John spoke. When he finished, she remained silent for a long moment, processing the information. "John," she said finally, "this is bigger than any of us imagined. If Green Haven really exists, if there are more of these birds there, it could be the key to saving the species," John completed. At that moment, the door to the meeting room opened and Lisa emerged, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Agent Clark followed, his expression grave. "The parrots will stay here for now," he announced, "but we'll be monitoring closely. And Miss Green, remember what we discussed?" When the wildlife agents finally left, A heavy silence fell over the rehabilitation center. Lisa seemed to be in a state of shock, her hands trembling slightly. John approached her cautiously. "Lisa, what happened in there?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "John, Dr. Emily, we need to talk. There's something you need to know about my father, about Green Haven, and why these parrots are more important than any of us imagined." As the three of them headed to the meeting room, John felt they were about to cross a point of no return. The mystery that had begun with a simple box at the airport was about to unfold into something much bigger, something that could change not only their lives, but the future of an entire species. Outside the window, Tico, Teko, and Tiana watched silently, unconscious guardians of a secret that could shake the conservation world to its core. The truth about Green Haven was about to be revealed, and with it, the fates of John, Lisa, and the last known night parrots in the world were about to intertwine in ways none of them could predict. The rehabilitation center's meeting room, usually a space for planning and scientific discussions, now felt too small to contain the tension hanging in the air. John, Doctor. Emily and Lisa sat around the oval table, the silence between them laden with expectation and apprehension. Lisa took a deep breath, her hands clasped on the table, trembling slightly. "What I'm about to tell you is something I swore never to reveal, but the circumstances have changed, and you deserve to know the truth. John and Doctor." Emily exchanged worried glances but remained silent, giving Lisa the space to continue. "Green Haven isn't just a myth," Lisa began, her voice low but firm. "It's real. It's a hidden sanctuary in the heart of the Atlantic forest, created by my father and a group of dedicated conservationists. A refuge for species the world believes extinct or on the brink of extinction." The revelation hung in the air for a moment, its magnitude almost palpable. Dr. Emily was the first to break the silence. "But how is that possible? How could something like that remain hidden for so long?" Lisa smiled sadly. "With a lot of care, dedication, and yes, secrecy. My father and his colleagues discovered a remote area of the forest, practically inaccessible. They created Green Haven as a last bastion against extinction, protecting species that had no chance anywhere else." John, his mind spinning with the implications, asked, "And the night parrots, they came from there?" Lisa nodded. "Yes, they're part of a small population my father discovered years ago. Green Haven became their only refuge." "But why did your father bring them here?" questioned Dr. Emily. "Why risk exposing them like this?" Lisa's face contorted with emotion. "Because Green Haven is in danger. In recent weeks, my father detected suspicious activities in the area. He feared someone had discovered the sanctuary. Bringing the parrots here was a desperate measure to ensure that if something happened to Green Haven, the species wouldn't be completely lost." John felt his heart tighten. Robert Greene's dedication to the conservation cause was admirable, but it also carried an enormous weight. "And your father's disappearance?" he asked gently. Lisa wiped away a solitary tear. "He didn't disappear. Not really. He returned to Green Haven to protect it. The disappearance was a cover so he could work without raising suspicion." Dr. Emily leaned forward, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Lisa, do you understand what you're telling us? This is revolutionary, but also incredibly dangerous." Lisa nodded gravely. "I know. And now that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is involved, I'm afraid it's only a matter of time before others find out. If the wrong people learn about Green Haven..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room could imagine the consequences. Poachers, animal traffickers, companies interested in exploiting the land. Green Haven could go from sanctuary to target in a matter of days. John, feeling the weight of responsibility, asked, "What can we do? How can we help?" Lisa looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and determination. "We need to protect the parrots here and at the same time find a way to ensure Green Haven's safety. My father left instructions for me in case something like this happened. There's a plan, but it's risky." "Doctor." Emily intervened, her voice filled with concern. "Lisa, you're asking us to get involved in something potentially illegal. We have to think about the consequences." Lisa nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know. And I understand if you don't want to get involved further. But you need to understand Green Haven isn't just a place. It's a last hope for dozens of species the world has already given up on. If we fail to protect it, we'll be condemning these creatures to extinction. The silence that followed was heavy, each person in the room lost in their own thoughts and moral dilemmas. John looked out the window, watching the night parrots in their aviary. Tico, and Tiana, the last of their kind known to the outside world. How many other wonders did Greenhaven hold? Finally, John broke the silence. "I'm in," he said, his voice firm. "I can't stand by knowing what I know now. These parrots, Greenhaven, they deserve a chance." Dr. Emily sighed deeply, massaging her temples. "This goes against everything I've learned in my career. But you're right, Lisa. What's at stake is too big to ignore. Count me in, too." Lisa looked at the two of them, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." "So what's the plan?" asked John, feeling the adrenaline start to course through his veins. Lisa stood up, walking over to a map of the region pinned to the wall. "First, we need to ensure the parrots here are safe. Then we have to find a way to reach Greenhaven without being detected. My father left coordinates and instructions hidden, but deciphering them won't be easy." Dr. Emily, ever practical, started making a list. "We'll need supplies, camping equipment, maybe even climbing gear. And we need a cover for our absence." John, feeling the weight of the decision they had made, added, "And we need to be prepared for what we might find there. If there are people threatening Greenhaven, we could be putting ourselves in real danger." Lisa nodded gravely. "You're right. It's dangerous and complicated. But if we succeed, we can not only save Greenhaven but also reveal to the world the importance of conservation in a way that has never been done before." As the three began to plan their improbable mission, outside the window, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the rehabilitation center. In the nearby aviaries, Tico, and Tiana nestled together, unaware of the whirlwind of events their presence had triggered. Night fell over the rehabilitation center, but for John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily, a new journey was just beginning. A journey that would take them to the heart of the forest, to the discovery of long-guarded secrets, and perhaps to the rediscovery of a world everyone thought lost forever. As they made their plans, none of them could imagine the challenges, dangers, and wonders that awaited them in the search for Greenhaven. The fate of countless species, and perhaps the future of conservation itself, now rested in their hands. The dawn found John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily still at the rehabilitation center, their faces marked by the fatigue of a sleepless night, but their eyes shining with determination. The decision to embark on the search for Greenhaven weighed on them, a mix of excitement and apprehension palpable in the air. "We have to be meticulous in our planning," said Dr. Emily, spreading maps and supply lists on the table. "Every detail can make the difference between success and failure." Lisa nodded, her fingers tracing invisible lines on the map of the region. "My father left clues about the exact location of Greenhaven, but deciphering them won't be easy. We have to be careful not to attract attention." John, who had spent the last hours researching camping and jungle survival equipment, added, "And we need to think of a convincing cover for our absence. We can't just disappear without raising suspicion." The three exchanged worried glances. The magnitude of what they were about to undertake was beginning to make itself felt. "I have an idea," said Dr. Emily after a moment of reflection. "We can say we're taking the parrots to a remote reintroduction site. It wouldn't be unusual for a conservation project of this magnitude." Lisa considered the suggestion. "It might work, but what about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?" "They'll certainly want more details." "Leave the Fish and Wildlife Service to me," replied Dr. Emily, with a determined gleam in her eyes. "I have some contacts who can give us cover, at least for a while." As they discussed the details of the plan, John found himself thinking about Susan and the airport. He knew he needed to talk to her, explain his absence somehow, but the idea of lying to his mentor deeply troubled him. "I need to go back to the airport," he said finally. "There are some things I need to resolve before we leave." Lisa looked at him with concern. "Are you sure it's safe? What if Susan suspects something?" John forced a confident smile. "Don't worry, I'll be discreet. Besides, I need to pick up some things at home and say goodbye in a way." The morning passed in a whirlwind of activities. Dr. Emily plunged into phone calls and emails, preparing the ground for their reintroduction expedition. Lisa focused on deciphering the clues left by her father, her eyes red from exhaustion and pent-up emotion. John, for his part, headed to the airport, his heart heavy with the weight of the secrets he now carried. Upon arrival, he found Susan in her office, her expression serious as she saw him. "John," she said, indicating a chair. "I've been wondering when you'd show up. We have a lot to discuss." Swallowing hard, John sat down. "Susan, She raised a hand, interrupting him. "Before you say anything, you need to know. I'm aware that something big is happening. The wildlife agents were here again asking questions about you and the box with the parrots." John's heart raced. Had he been discovered before even starting? Susan continued, her voice softer now. "John, we've worked together long enough for me to know when someone is hiding something. I'm not going to ask you to tell me everything, but I need to know. Are you in danger?" The genuine concern in her voice touched John deeply. For a moment, he considered telling her everything, but the thought of Greenhaven, the parrots, and everything at stake made him hesitate. "I'm not in danger, Susan," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "But I'm involved in something important, something that can make a difference for those parrots and maybe much more." Susan studied him for a long moment before sighing. "I understand, and I imagine you're here to ask for leave." John nodded, grateful for her insight. "Yes, I need a few weeks. It's for a conservation project related to the parrots. I can't go into details, but—" "It's okay," interrupted Susan, surprising him. "For you have your leave, but John, promise me one thing. If you find yourself in trouble, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Understood?" Moved by Susan's trust and support, John could only nod. As he left the office, he felt as if a chapter of his life was closing while another, much more uncertain, was opening before him. Back at the rehabilitation center, John found Lisa and Dr. Emily finalizing the preparations. Backpacks were ready, equipment checked and rechecked. The 3 night parrots had been carefully placed in special transport boxes designed to keep them safe and comfortable during the journey. "Everything's ready," announced Dr. Emily, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. "We'll leave at dawn." As night fell, the 3 gathered one last time around the aviaries, watching Tico, Teco, and Tiana. The parrots seemed to sense the atmosphere of expectation, their bright eyes fixed on their caregivers. "It's incredible to think that these 3 might be the key to saving their species," murmured John. Lisa smiled softly. "It's not just them, it's us too. All of us together fighting for something bigger than ourselves." Dr. Emily placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "What we're about to do is risky, maybe even crazy, but if we succeed, we could change the world," completed John. The first stars began to dot the night sky as they finally retired to try to get some rest. Tomorrow at dawn, they would embark on a journey that would take them to the heart of the forest, in search of a sanctuary that could redefine the future of conservation. Lying in his improvised sleeping bag, John couldn't sleep. His mind wandered between the memories of the past days and the uncertainties of the future. What would they find in Greenhaven? And what if they arrived too late? Beside him, he could hear Lisa's soft breathing and Dr. Emily's occasional murmurs. United by fate and a common purpose, the 3 now carried the weight of a secret that could change the world. Outside, the night advanced, the hours inexorably slipping towards dawn. In a few hours, they would set out on a mission that would test their limits, challenge their convictions, and bring them face to face with wonders few humans had ever witnessed. As sleep finally claimed him, John had one last conscious thought. Whatever the outcome, nothing would be the same after Greenhaven. The sun had barely begun to tint the horizon pink when John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily loaded the last of their equipment into the sturdy 4x4 truck. The transport boxes containing Tico, Teco, and Tiana were carefully secured, wrapped in blankets to protect them from the morning chill. "Everyone ready?" asked Dr. Emily, her voice a mix of nervous energy and determination. Lisa made one last check on her map, where she had marked the coded coordinates left by her father. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, exchanging a significant look with John. With a final nod to the rehabilitation center, they set off. The city was still asleep as they drove through its empty streets, the first rays of sunlight reflecting off the glass buildings like a promise of the day to come. As they left civilization behind, the landscape gradually changed. Buildings gave way to farms, which in turn yielded to increasingly dense vegetation. The road, once smooth and well-paved, became a bumpy dirt trail that tested Dr. Emily's driving skills. "According to my father's instructions," said Lisa, consulting her notes, "we need to follow this road for another 50 kilometers before reaching an unmarked fork. That's where things get tricky." John, sitting in the back seat next to the Parrot's transport boxes, felt a mix of excitement and apprehension growing in his chest. Each kilometer brought them deeper into the unknown, closer to the mysterious sanctuary that could change everything. After hours of travel, with the sun high in the sky, they finally reached the fork Lisa had mentioned. It was little more than an almost invisible trail, partially covered by vegetation. "This is it," announced Lisa, her voice trembling with emotion. "From here on, we're officially off the map." Dr. Emily skillfully maneuvered the vehicle onto the narrow trail. Branches and foliage scraped the sides of the truck, as if the forest itself were trying to prevent their advance. As they progressed, the forest around them seemed to change subtly. The trees grew taller, older. The air became denser, filled with the scent of humus and wildlife. Sounds of birds and insects they didn't recognize echoed through the woods. "It's incredible," murmured John, his eyes wide as he tried to take in every detail. "It feels like we're entering another world." Lisa nodded, her expression a mix of reverence and nostalgia. "My father used to say that entering Green Haven was like stepping back in time to a period when nature reigned supreme." As they advanced, the trail became increasingly difficult to follow. Several times they had to stop to remove obstacles or consult the enigmatic instructions left by Lisa's father. It was during one of these stops that John noticed something strange. "Hey, do you hear that?" Everyone fell silent, straining their ears. For a moment all they heard was the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. Then, almost imperceptibly, came a different sound, a low, constant hum. "It sounds like an engine," suggested Dr. Emily, frowning. Lisa's face paled. "There shouldn't be anyone here. No one besides us knows this path." A tense silence fell over the group. The possibility that they weren't alone, that someone else might be searching for Green Haven, hung heavily in the air. "What do we do now?" asked John, his voice low and tense. Lisa bit her lip, her eyes quickly scanning the map. "We have to keep going. We're too close now to turn back, but we need to be more cautious." With a nod of agreement, they resumed their journey, now moving more slowly, every sense alert for any sign of danger. The hours dragged on, the tension growing with each kilometer traveled. The distant hum sometimes seemed to get closer. Other times it disappeared completely, leaving them in a constant state of nervousness. It was late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set and cast long shadows through the forest, that they finally arrived at a clearing. In the center stood a structure that seemed to blend with the forest itself, a cabin built from natural materials, almost invisible among the trees. "This is it," whispered Lisa, her voice choked with emotion. "The outpost of Green Haven." They exited the vehicle in silence, absorbing the almost magical atmosphere of the place. The cabin seemed abandoned for some time, leaves and vines partially covering its walls. John approached the structure, his heart racing. It was then that he noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the side of the cabin, partially hidden by vegetation, were recent marks. Marks that looked like they had been made by heavy vehicle tires. "Lisa, Dr. Emily," he called, his voice trembling. "I don't think we're the first to arrive here." The two women quickly approached, their faces contorting in expressions of shock and concern when they saw the marks. "This is not good," murmured Dr. Emily. "Not good at all." Lisa, her face a mask of determination, advanced toward the cabin. "We have to go inside. If someone got here before us, there might be clues about where they went, or what they're looking for." Cautiously, the three approached the cabin entrance. The door was ajar, creaking softly in the evening breeze. John felt a shiver run down his spine as Lisa reached out to push the door open. The interior of the cabin was shrouded in shadows, the air heavy with the smell of mold and abandonment. But as their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they realized something was terribly wrong. The place had been ransacked. Drawers were open, their contents strewn across the floor. Maps and documents covered every surface, many torn or stained. And in the center of the room, pinned to the wooden wall with a hunting knife, was a piece of paper with a message that made everyone's blood run cold. "We know about Green Haven. You're too late." The ensuing silence was deafening. John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily exchanged looks, the weight of the realization falling upon them like an avalanche. Their mission, already dangerous, had just become a race against time. Green Haven, the secret sanctuary that promised hope for countless endangered species, was under threat, and they were the only line of defense between this hidden paradise and those who sought to exploit it. With the sun setting on the horizon, casting ominous shadows through the forest, the three faced a crucial choice. Retreat and seek help, risking arriving too late, or advance into the unknown, facing dangers they could barely imagine? Night fell over the forest, and with it, the certainty that the true battle for Green Haven was just beginning. The tropical night enveloped the cabin in darkness, punctuated only by the nocturnal sounds of the forest and the occasional uneasy chirp from the night parrots in their transport boxes. Inside the dilapidated structure, John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily discussed their next steps fervently. "We can't just turn back," insisted Lisa, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "If these invaders reach Green Haven before us, everything will be lost." Dr. Emily, always the voice of reason, countered, "But advancing blindly would be madness. We don't know how many they are or what kind of equipment they have." John, who had been examining the maps scattered on the floor, suddenly stood up. "Wait, I think I found something." He pointed to a particularly detailed map of the region. In the corner, almost imperceptibly, were scribbled coordinates and a symbol resembling a stylized tree. "The symbol of Green Haven," whispered Lisa, recognizing it instantly. "My father must have left this as a last precaution." With renewed hope, the trio spent the next few hours planning meticulously. They decided to leave before dawn, taking only the essentials and, of course, the precious night parrots. The journey that followed was one of the most challenging of their lives. Almost invisible trails, treacherous streams, and vegetation so dense that they sometimes had to cut their way through with machetes. All the while, the feeling of being watched, of being in a race against invisible enemies, weighed on them. On the third day of walking, with their supplies running low and fatigue threatening to overwhelm them, something extraordinary happened. As they rounded a particularly steep rock formation, they suddenly found themselves before a sight that took their breath away. An extensive valley opened up before them, covered by a forest more lush and diverse than anything they had ever seen. "Green Haven," murmured Lisa, tears streaming down her face. The valley pulsed with life. Butterflies of impossible colors danced among flowers none of them recognized. In the trees, monkeys of species believed extinct watched them curiously. And in the air, the sound of dozens, maybe hundreds of different bird species. But their admiration was interrupted by a distant and familiar sound. Engines. "The invaders," said John, his heart racing. "They're close." With renewed urgency, the group hurried into the valley. As they advanced, they began to notice camouflage structures among the trees, field laboratories, aviaries, all so perfectly integrated into nature that it would be impossible to detect them from the air. It was in one of these structures that they finally found signs of recent human activity. And not just that, but also the answer to the mystery that had brought them there. Robert Green, Lisa's father, was alive. The reunion between father and daughter was emotional but brief. There was no time for long explanations. "The invaders are treasure hunters," Robert quickly explained. "Somehow, they discovered Green Haven and believe there are hidden riches here. But the true treasure is the species you protect," said Dr. Emily, understanding the magnitude of the situation. Robert nodded gravely. "Exactly. And if they reach the heart of Green Haven, decades of conservation work will be destroyed in a matter of hours." Quickly, a plan was devised. While Robert and his small team of conservationists prepared for the emergency evacuation of the rarest and most vulnerable species, John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily took on a crucial mission: to mislead the invaders. Using their knowledge of the forest and camouflage techniques learned from the indigenous peoples of the region, the trio moved silently through the jungle, leaving false trails and setting up ingenious distractions. The tension reached its peak when they finally came face to face with the invaders. A group of 6 armed men, led by a figure John recognized with a shock. It was the same man from the airport footage, the one who had left the box with the parrots. What followed was a frantic chase through the forest. John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily used all their knowledge and creativity to keep the invaders disoriented and away from the heart of Greenhaven. In a moment of brilliant inspiration, Lisa had an idea. Using recorded vocalizations of the night parrots, they created a soundtrack that led the invaders away from their goal, making them believe they were following the rare birds. The strategy worked. Exhausted and frustrated, the invaders eventually gave up, convinced that Greenhaven was nothing more than a myth. When they finally returned to the base camp, John, Lisa, and Dr. Emily were received as heroes. Their courage and ingenuity had saved not only Greenhaven, but potentially dozens of unique species. In the days that followed, difficult decisions had to be made. Robert Greene, recognizing that Greenhaven's secret was compromised, agreed that it was time to reveal its existence to the world, but on their terms. Dr. Emily, with her contacts in the scientific community, would be instrumental in organizing an official expedition, bringing respected researchers to document the wonders of Greenhaven. Lisa, finally reconciled with her father and his legacy, decided to stay in Greenhaven, taking on a leadership role in managing the sanctuary. And John? His role in discovering and protecting Greenhaven catapulted him from a simple airport employee to a respected figure in the conservation world. He decided to dedicate his life to protecting places like Greenhaven, using his experience to train a new generation of nature guardians. Months later, when the first official expedition arrived at Greenhaven, the world watched in awe at the images of species believed lost forever. The story of the night parrots, Greenhaven, and the unlikely heroes who saved it captured the global public's imagination. Greenhaven became a symbol of hope, a reminder that with dedication and courage, it is possible to make a difference in the fight to preserve our planet. On a quiet night, months after their great adventure, John found himself once again at the rehabilitation center, watching Tico, and Tiana in their new and spacious aviary. The birds, now healthy and vibrant, would soon be reintroduced to Greenhaven, where a growing population of their species awaited them. Lisa joined him, intertwining her fingers with his. "Who would have thought that a simple box at the airport would lead to all this?" she said, smiling. John nodded, reflecting on the incredible journey they had undertaken. "Sometimes," he replied, "the greatest adventures start in the most unlikely places." As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, John and Lisa remained there, contemplating the future. A future where Greenhaven and its secrets would continue to inspire and amaze the world, reminding everyone of the priceless value of wild nature and the importance of protecting it, no matter how impossible the task might seem. And so, with the soft song of the night parrots echoing in the night, the story of Greenhaven, a story of courage, discovery, and hope, continued, promising new chapters and adventures for generations to come.